Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So welcome to the public session of the Board of Education meeting, June 20th. We are just coming out of executive session, so we're going to jump to the agenda, board president comments. We've already read the Open Public Meeting Act, did the Pledge of Allegiance, we've taken attendance. Just a quick housekeeping. We're going to keep the same format of the Board of Education meetings that we've had for a while now. We're going to do the committee reports, the board agenda, we're going to do liaisons. We'll have our first opportunity for public commentary, then we're going to get through our agenda. We'll have our second opportunity for public commentary, and then after that, the board members, if they choose, or if they have comments or additional questions. So during the public commentary, it's not a back and forth, it's an opportunity for you to present your position, your opinions, share your thoughts on any particular items pertinent to the school district. We will not be responding, we will not be answering questions back and forth. This is your opportunity to speak to the board, and if any board members have a comment, if you would hang on to it till the end of the second public commentary session. I notice you've already read all the agenda items. We have a packed agenda, we have presentations, which may take a while, so if you just bear with us and we'll get through the agenda as quickly as possible. With that being said, we're going to move right on to the superintendent's report. Dr. LaSousa.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Just a few housekeeping items before we move into the first presentation. The first is, from an enrollment standpoint, we continue to register students sporadically. We'll do so throughout the summer. The one hot spot right now is at Southern Boulevard School in first grade, where we have 118 students either registered or pre-registered. And we have only 5 sections at this point, so we will be adding a section to Southern Boulevard School first grade to keep our numbers manageable. We also have some rising enrollment at kindergarten at Southern Boulevard School too. However, we have space at the kindergartens in Milton Avenue and Washington Avenue. So if we get to a point a month or two from now where we have to offer some families the ability to go to either Washington or Milton for kindergarten, we would do that so as to avoid having to hire staff, which is something we've done in years past at Washington Avenue School. We've directed people to Southern. That didn't ever materialize because we had a few students who didn't show up on the first day of school or didn't follow through with their registration, but that's the plan that we have right now for Southern Boulevard School kindergarten. Staffing-wise, we are almost fully staffed with the exception of 1 or 2 positions. On the addendum tonight, there's one candidate with whom Beth Grant and I met today, filling a Lafayette Avenue School position. So we're in very, very good shape from a staffing standpoint, with the exception of just 1 or 2 late resignations or retirements. So that's going all well. I just also want to congratulate the staff at the middle school. They just returned from a very successful trip to Washington, D.C. This year they included the Holocaust Museum in their tour, and I know that was something Ms. Clark actually had recommended last year, and they made that happen, and my understanding is it was one of the highlights of the trip from what I hear. So that was great. Now I'll turn to our assistant principals, 2 of our assistant principals, Lori Gironda at the high school and Anthony Giaconia at Chatham Middle School, and they will present the annual trends in discipline. And as they're setting up, I'll just mention that typically we don't spend a lot of time at our elementary level with respect to discipline trends because we have very few incidents. But I will mention that Lafayette Avenue School has seen a reduction in the number of disciplinary incidents this year and HIB incidents too. And they attribute that in part to the time they've spent on giving kids moments in the day where they can simmer down and focus and just have some quiet time, just a few minutes a couple of times a day. I'll probably delve more into that next year when we return in September. But for now, I'll just turn it over to Anthony and Lori, and they'll talk about our secondary level disciplinary track record here over the past year. Yep, so take that off. And you guys can take the mic.
Okay, so thank you very much for having us here tonight to present the report on trends in discipline for 2015-16. What we're going to be taking a look at are some of the trends that we've seen over the past year or two at both Chatham Middle School and Chatham High School. One of the main points to just be aware of is that relative to the size of our student body and the fact that our student body, keeps increasing, our number of disciplinary infractions remains small. And that's something that's very important to us because we really are striving as our population is increasing to keep the culture and the climate of the school positive, and a lot of that has to do with school discipline and making sure that everything is going well from the student perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony for a couple minutes to talk about what he's seeing at CMS.
Thank you very much. To begin with, cafeteria time, lunchtime, is traditionally a time for students to kind of let off some steam. Now, that being said, the behavior in the cafeteria has been a focus at CMS as of recently. Students, some of the infractions are throwing items, hitting other students in a jokingly way, and making inappropriate comments. The only problem is eventually those words, those actions sometimes cross the line, and students who are good friends with each other, they become upset with each other, and that's when it kind of escalates to a disciplinary infraction or even a HIB violation at some point. Comments of a racial nature have also been a recurring trend in CMS HIB investigations. Since I took my office on April 25th as assistant principal at CMS, I've conducted 10 HIB investigations. Of those 10, 6 were confirmed as HIB, and of those 6, 4 of the 6 dealt with comments made of a racial nature. And I'll go into that a little bit more in detail at the end of the presentation.
At the high school, some of the things that we've really been focusing on over the past 2 years is the issue of students under the influence of substances, whether in school or at school related events, such as sporting events or dances. And when I talk about out of school suspensions, you'll see those numbers, but last year we had 14 students who received suspensions for substance use. This year our numbers went down to 7, and we really continue to try to work those numbers down by addressing that issue in whatever way that we can. Another issue that we're also focusing on at the high school is chronic absenteeism, which is defined as 2 or more absences per month. We're addressing this through updating our attendance procedures. We do assign discipline for students who have excessive tardiness, and we do assign loss of credit for students who have excessive absences. And one of the things that I was very happy to know is that we are, as a district, tracking attendance in the elementary grades as well, because we do know that chronic absenteeism often starts early on in a student's school career. So if we take a look specifically at Chatham High School information, what I have here is just a list of some of the infractions that may be committed by our students, along with the typical discipline for those infractions. And discipline generally ranges from a warning to detention, Saturday school, suspension of course is possible, and loss of privileges such as computer privileges or open campus privileges. Taking a look at this year, we had 1,198 students in our population. There were 364 discipline type incidents. We categorize our incidents into 2 different groups, discipline type and file type. Discipline type are the more significant kinds of incidents that are usually assigned something like a detention, Saturday school, or suspension. So with 364 total incidents over 1,198 students, that comes out to about 0.305 incidents per student. And this year, and we're very similar to what we experienced last year, we had 180 students out of our 1,198 in the school commit 1 or more incidents. So that's 15% of our student body did something that required some kind of disciplinary intervention. The number when we get to 5 or more incidents plummets down to 16. 16 students out of 1,198 committed 5 or more, which is about 1.33% of our student population. And you may be wondering, what would those incidents be if somebody is committing 5 or more? These are usually things like cell phone infractions or possibly disruptive student infractions. We had 10 students this year who committed between 5 and 10 incidents. 6 students who committed between 11 and 19 incidents. And just to address those 6 students and the 4 students that were in a similar situation last year, when we are looking at those particular students, we are often dealing not only with the student, but with their parents, and also with supports both in the building as well as outside of the building to try to address the reason for that behavior and how we can turn things around to make it more positive. And then in terms of 20 or more students with 20 or more incidents, this year and last year, we did not have any students who fit that category. We did, however, in the 2012-13 and 13-14 school years. And generally speaking, students who commit 20 or more incidents do not usually remain within the building. In terms of our out-of-school suspensions, last year and this year were pretty consistent, 16 out-of-school suspensions. As I mentioned, last year, 14 out-of-school suspensions were due to substance use, and then the others were for a variety of different reasons. This year, only 7 were due to substance use, and some of the infractions that made up the other suspensions were vandalism, physical altercations, failure to attend Saturday school, although that's not very common, and of course harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And unfortunately, we had a couple of students who were suspended for that. Breaking down our disciplinary incidents between, across the genders, male and female, and then across the grades, we can see that over the past 2 years, between 70% and 80% of the disciplinary incidents were committed by males, and between 20 and 30% were attributed to females. And then we also see that there are, generally speaking, more incidents that are committed by younger students rather than older students, and of course maturity plays a piece in that. And I also believe that open campus is actually a positive thing for encouraging our older students to behave well. Because they recognize that as seniors, if they are not doing what they need to do, that is a privilege that could be removed. So it's kind of a nice carrot for them. As I mentioned earlier, the 2 kind of pools of disciplinary incidents that we have are the discipline type and the file type. And of our file type incidents, these include things like coming late to school, coming late to class, not signing in properly upon arrival to school, things like that. We have 406 incidents on record and 267 students who were involved in those kinds of incidents. So if you think back, we had 180 students who were involved in discipline type, 267 involved in file type. Unfortunately, this attendance issue is something that, is somewhat common, and it's something that we really are focusing on. So, students who are habitually late to school and or class, that issue is categorized as a file type incident. And it can result in assigned discipline or loss of credit for a class. And then the last slide that I have here, really talking about our discipline at the high school, is about academic integrity. This is something that we've really been taking a look at over the past 4 years, really. We have very much been encouraging our teachers to report incidents. A lot of times what happens is teachers want to handle the incidents within the classroom, which is great, and they're teaching students how to cite sources correctly and how to make sure that they're doing their own work, etc. But we really needed to make sure that they were including or entering that information into the student database, so that if there were repeat offenses, if a student really wasn't learning from their prior mistakes, we really needed to know that. It's very important that we address that at the high school level, rather than letting students graduate and feel like that there are certain things that they can do in the college environment that really will not bode well for them. And now I will hand it over to Anthony.
Thank you again. So looking at the middle school, here again are some typical infractions and typical disciplines that are discipline measures that are implemented at the middle school. You're going to see a lot of overlapping with the high school as well. Discipline at the middle school also escalates in terms of the number of offenses, so we may start with a warning, a parent conference, a conference with an administrator, and move up to detentions or suspensions. What you don't see here, of course, are incidents of classroom level discipline that may be handled solely by a teacher, and not, that means that the incident really didn't raise to the level of needing an administrator to step in. Here you see the total enrollment versus the total number of incidents. The enrollment, as you can see, has gone up from 2014-15, about 67 students more, yet there was a significant drop in the total number of incidents reported on our Genesis system from 166 to 97. Now, these 97 represent discipline type incidents, so again, these are your detentions, suspensions, things along those lines. We also have 22 file type incidents that were reported in Genesis as well. We input our HIB targets, or HIB targets, into the Genesis system to keep track of them. So that might be a typical file type incident. Warnings, historical information on students is also entered into Genesis as well. So those account for the other 22. The frequency with which the infractions occur. Students with one incident, you can see 2014-15 to 15-16, you can see there was a drop there. And then if we move to students with two incidents, there was a significant drop there from 18 to 6. So definitely a step in the right direction. 3 incidents remain the same for the most part. I mean, went from 1.2% to 1%, but the thing to really take notice of is the students with 5+ incidents, we went from 4 to 0. And this, I believe, really accounts for that significant drop on the previous slide that you saw there, how the students, basically, the students aren't committing as many infractions as they were in the past. And as in the high school, you know, obviously we can see that there are a very small number of students. You look back here, you know, 4.6, 0.57, 1.0, very small number of students committing most of the infractions at the middle school. Suspensions, we went up from 6 to 8 students with 1 out-of-school suspension. The reason for the star there is 1 student received a half-a-day suspension, which isn't, you know, the norm, but it did happen this year. The students with 2+ out-of-school suspensions went from 14 to 5. So again, a great step in the right direction. And you know, the suspensions are usually for particularly egregious infractions of the rules. So that means that the students really aren't committing those types of infractions that warrant suspensions at that great of a rate any longer. Total days of suspension this year amount to 21.5. Altogether for all the students. Suspensions were issued for various reasons. The 2 top categories that I noticed on Genesis, jeopardizing the safety of others accounted for 5 of the 21.5 days, and disruptive inappropriate behavior accounted for 7 of the 21.5 days. If we use 97 discipline type incidents as our number, you can see that the number of incidents is really spread out almost evenly between the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, but predominantly most of our infractions are committed by males. We have 93.8% versus 6.2%.
Mr. Gilfell's profile.
And now I'll turn it back over to Lori for HIB data.
Okay, so for our HIP data for 2014-15, we completed 9 investigations at the high school. 5 of those were confirmed to be HIB. All 5 of those were committed by upperclassmen. 1 student reoffended, and there were 0 repeat targets. And in terms of the distinguishing characteristic that was at the center of these, it was mainly about physical appearance. So there was a lot of students calling one another fat, or making fun of some other thing regarding their physical appearance. In contrast, this year we have had 18 investigations at the high school. 15 of those were confirmed to be HIB. 12 of those were committed by 9th grade students. And 3 students reoffended, and we had 3 repeat targets. And in terms of the identifying characteristics here, these were really spread across gender identity, race, ethnicity, religion, disability, and physical characteristics. So it really covered a lot of different things.
In terms of the middle school, our numbers of investigations are higher. So in 2014-15, we had 28 investigations. This year, we had 33 investigations. The number of incidents confirmed as HIB remained the same, 14 in each category. The number of students who reoffended and our repeat targets went from 5 and 4 to 0 and 0. Of those 14 confirmed acts of HIB this year, 8 dealt with race, 3 dealt with special education status, and of those 3, 1 incident had 2 victims. 1 dealt with body image, and 1 dealt with a comment regarding sexual orientation. Of the 14 incidents that were confirmed HIB, 13 of the 14 were verbal comments, and 1 of them involved electronic communication. And in an attempt to get those numbers a little bit lower, I've met with the PTO already this year to plan out some HIB-related assemblies for next year. I met with the school safety team to discuss this trend and to try to come up with ideas for the Week of Respect and to extend that theme of respect throughout the entire year and not just for that 1 week in October. Thank you very much.
Yes, I actually did have a couple questions. Thank you. So, Anthony, just real quick, so one of the things that you focused on, I mean, some of these are not horrible problems to have. You said cafeteria behavior.
Right.
In the middle school. I mean, in the relative scheme of things, it's not really the worst problem to have.
True,
and
true.
Probably one of the easier ones to fix. But you did mention that 8 out of your 14 incidents were race-related?
Yes.
So will that also be a focus on education next year?
Absolutely. In
at the middle
fact,
school?
when I met with the school safety team, that was one of our major focuses, trying to incorporate more activities geared towards cultural tolerance and cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness. So we were kicking around some ideas. Again, we have the Week of Respect, but that's just 1 week in October. We want to try to get some activities in on a regular basis throughout the entire school year, maybe even once a month if possible. Okay. And we've been throwing around some ideas with the school safety team, and I met with the PTO, and they're going to help us out with implementing some HIB-related assemblies that focus on character education, the theme of respect throughout the school year.
Okay, fantastic, perfect, thank you. And Laura, just had a quick question. Well, just a comment that it's great to see that the substance abuse incidents are down. I mean, you've been all working very hard over a good decade to try and get those numbers down, and you're starting to see some results. I just had a question. Have you had opportunity, either this year or in years past, to revoke an individual's open campus?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and what's the numbers generally? I was hoping you were going to say no, that never happens.
Yeah, no, and really, it happens mainly due to class cuts,
Okay.
because that is the penalty for a senior who cuts class. They get an automatic 2-week open campus suspension.
Okay.
If a student comes back late from open campus and we don't get notification from a parent that the student is sick and they're aware that they're at home, they have an open campus suspension for that as well. So, yeah, we definitely.
Oh, that happens fairly.
I don't want to say regularly.
Okay.
We maybe have suspended 4 or 5 students open campus throughout the year.
Okay, that's a
Yeah.
fairly low number. Thank you. I'm sorry. Does anybody else have any? Rich?
Two. For both of you, I guess the harassment dealing with ACE or. Mic on, right, please. Sorry. With regard to the harassment of the students based upon race or ethnicity, is there a particular race or ethnicity that is being targeted, or is it just across the board?
Well, since I began, I think.
And at this point, I don't want to know what the race or ethnicity is. I'm
Yes,
just focusing,
the answer is yes. Yes. Since I began, as I said, 6 of the 10 HIB investigations I've conducted were confirmed. 4 of those 6 dealt with a single race that was targeted.
And with regard to the alcohol, the drug, the under the influence, I don't
Yes.
really know if this matters, but is it more alcohol related versus controlled dangerous substance versus what's in
Yes,
the
what-
parents' medicine cabinet?
What we have been identifying in students when they're using is usually alcohol.
Okay.
Yes, and I would really say that it's not so much in school. We're not seeing all that
Oh,
much
okay,
going
good.
on in school, but we are unfortunately seeing too much going on at the extracurricular activities.
But it seems to be more alcohol related as opposed to
Yes.
controlled dangerous substance or medicine cabinet?
What we are identifying, yes.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Nothing else? Thank you. Lori, you have nothing else for us? Nothing else you want to discuss? Anthony, really? It's first year, you can make some brownie points, you may come sometime. Thank you very much. Good luck with graduations.
The last item on my agenda is just to continue or to maybe summarize the discussion over the Washington Avenue School parking lot expansion. And this isn't meant to be a persuasive essay, but just rather a summary of, why we are where we are. So just an overview is that at Washington Avenue School, and I'll preface this by saying, of course, we've been engaged with the borough for multiple years over this issue, and we've met with police officers to look at the traffic. We've considered alternative parking expansions, all of which were larger than the one that is currently in front of the board or that we're currently preparing to undertake in less than a month. And ultimately, after those years of discussions with the borough, this is what we came to, and of course that issue was prompted in large measure by the fact that there's a legal issue playing out between the borough and a resident alongside one of the driveways. So at the current lot, there are 73 conventional spaces. I did not include the 2 handicap spaces and then the one eyesore of a space that is just a makeshift gravel depository up near the sidewalk on Washington Ave. In terms of our staff members, we've got 40 full-time staff members that work at the school. Most of them are teachers, naturally, but we have a couple of secretaries and a principal and a nurse and other staff members, support staff. We have 38 part-timers right now. Most of them are paraprofessionals. So usually if we have a special education student that requires paraprofessional support, we have an AM and a PM para for that one individual. So most of the 38 are paras whose schedules overlap, but who are assigned to a student via the IEP. And then we have a couple of teachers who are part-time too. Then we have 8 itinerant staff who may come to the school on a very regular basis. In some cases it could be every day. In other cases it could be once a week or even less. It just depends on the nature of the service and the person. Most of those are connected to child study team or special education services in one way or the other, although the ESL teacher is not involved there. And then we have 8 other itinerant staff that comprise our supervisory staff that work with teachers either on professional development type related issues or evaluation, et cetera. And at the current time, we don't have any spots for visitors. So the layout of the proposed lot, this is the one that Peter has worked on closely with the borough engineer and Bob Falzerano and others there. This is the area of the proposed lot, the 20 spots. Just want to show it so that everyone knows what we're talking about. The dimensions of the lot would be in terms of increase, because remember we're moving the driveway to the right, or the borough is vacating the driveway because of the legal issue with the resident who lives over here. So the net increase in macadam would be about 0.16 of an acre, and the net increase of impervious surface of all kinds, so that'd be the sidewalk and the lot and the pad for the dumpster, would be 0.218 acre. And I know there have been some questions about this, so obviously parking's been a shortage in the district in recent years. That's a result of the enrollment increases that we've seen. In Milton Avenue School, we expanded the parking lot in 2010 from about 27 spots to 45 or so right now. We've been in discussions with the borough about Duchamp, because that portion of Duchamp leading over to the recycling area, dump, whatever the proper term is owned by the district, and we're working on a agreement with them so that they can maintain and repair some of that road, but then also build in some formal parking there. Southern Boulevard School, we just simply have no need to build a lot there from my point of view, because Colony Pool is where we direct our certain paraprofessional staff and parents whenever we have an event, especially now that we have ordinances in place around the school that prohibit parking for more than a few hours. CMS is not really an issue. We have two big parking lots there, so for the most part, CMS is okay. And at CHS in Lafayette, we added 89 spots in 2011, and we took over the parking lot or the playground area in the front of the school at some point. I don't know exactly when, but I know that there used to be recess and other activities out there, and now it's a full-time parking lot. So the spots to be added, again, that's the area depicted here would be a 20-spot addition, and Peter has worked with the borough on planning and coordinating the construction, and of course, it's somewhat dependent, or it's been prompted in part by the fact that the driveway has to be moved in conjunction with the vacation of the driveway area, or that road, or whatever you want to call it, from the borough to the resident. That's a brief summary.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. LaSousa? No? Saying none? Very good. Dr. LaSousa, did you have any other additional items for your report?
No, though I should mention on the heels of the discipline report that we did move through a successful senior prom without incident. All reports, at least that came to me, were that the students were extremely well behaved, they had a good time, and it's always nice when you get to the end of the year and you've had a couple of big events like a trip to Washington, D.C. and a prom a week later, that things have gone relatively well, and all students emerged in a happy, positive, healthful place.
Those are wins for sure.
Wins.
I did have a quick question on the Washington school trip. Had we not gone through the Holocaust Museum in the previous year?
The first year we were unable, there's such a wait to get in that the first year we couldn't make it happen.
Okay.
But it was a priority for this year, and like I said, it went very well from what I
Excellent.
understand.
And we can keep that on the
That's the
itinerary?
plan.
Okay. I didn't realize there was more than a year wait on that. That's
For
interesting.
large groups, apparently, there's a wait. And from what I understand, while they were down there, they ran into Chester, Mendham, Ridgewood, a whole host of schools in the nearby area from New Jersey who happened to be going down the same way.
And they ran into Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I didn't hear that one
Yes,
yet.
he was riding his bike. Yes, they took some photos.
I guess he stands out
Yeah, apparently.
on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Well, that's
They were
great.
all very excited about that.
So the Holocaust studies that's a cycle that every eighth grader takes.
Every eighth,
So
yep.
by the time they get to Washington DC, they've all gone through it and some are finishing it. So it's perfect.
Perfect.
That's excellent. Thank you. Does anybody have any additional questions for Dr. LaSousa? All good. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to the business administrator's report. Peter?
Since Dr. LaSousa stole my thunder on the Washington lot, the only other thing I have to report on that issue is waiting to hear from the borough engineer, Vince Donave, once the borough, I guess, cameras the existing drain, so he can start planning out how to create the drainage alongside the neighbor's property.
Okay. Okay. And when is he doing the cameraing?
He requested it from the crew, and I was hopeful it was going to happen last week. I didn't hear from him today, so hopefully.
Okay. And that's from the street, right? That doesn't impact.
No, that is on the, I guess, on the swale area, because there are some drains that he wants to put in to connect more storm drains, so that the water from the field goes into the storm, directly into the storm drain.
Right, okay.
Not just lay in the area.
Okay. Well, school's letting out in a few days, so. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. DeQuilla? No? Okay. Moving on to committee reports, starting with personnel. Ms. Clark?
Personnel has not met since our last meeting.
Excellent. Curriculum, Ms. Kenny?
Curriculum met last Wednesday. We reviewed the discipline report that was just presented. Also, the administration gave us an update on the robotics program at CHS. As you know, we increased the stipend to the teachers supervising the robotics club called the Chatham Cougars, and they were the students that did the presentation to us a couple of weeks ago. And the CHS administration has looked to see if there were any teachers that wanted to sponsor the group known as Fear the Gear, and unfortunately at this point there has been no interest.
Okay.
So that was the two items that we discussed.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Lotto or Ms. Chase on any of the curriculum items? No? Perfect. Moving on to finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan?
We haven't met since the last meeting. We now meet July the 18th.
July 18th. Okay, very good, thank you. And policy and planning, that was an excellent meeting last week.
We met last week. We discussed school calendars for 2017-18. We discussed the calendar for this Board of Ed and the subcommittee meetings. And we also had the discussion around a number of the policies on the meeting tonight. 6 of them originating from the Comprehensive Equity Plan, which speaks to equal equity for all learners in the district. So just kind of revising that. No real, we certainly would not expect CBS 2 News to jump on any of those.
Okay, you never know. Just a quick question, Dr. LaSousse, on the calendars, you sent them out to the teachers and the parents for some feedback? And when is that feedback being closed to get the results of that?
We're closing it at the end of this week to coincide with the school year, and then we'll have the results ready for July 18th, and the hope would be to adopt the calendar July 18th for 17-18.
Okay.
Is there any way you can send another reminder? I just think this is a crazy week for parents, maybe just as the week closes out, just that it is closing out, and take a
Yep.
look and put your 2 cents in.
Okay, excellent. Let's do it as part of the agenda, thank you. Moving on to the liaison reports, Mr. Connors for the borough.
Nothing to report, other than what's been kicked around rather extensively regarding the Washington Avenue.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to the township, Ms. Clark.
Nothing to report from the township.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Mr. Connors, back to you on the boosters.
They have not met since our last meeting. I don't know if there's a July meeting.
I think they're done for the
I
year,
think they're
but,
done.
okay. Moving on to music and theater boosters, I'm going to take up all of your time. So congratulations, shout out to Mary Kate Wilcott, who was selected as one of the 20 high school singers across the state for the New Jersey All-State Jazz Choir. Also, the Chatham Middle School theater class presented their class plays to very large and appreciative audiences. Many productions are designed to fit inside a particular class period, and they're performed by each of the theater classes, and they were supported by the stagecraft, who built all the and anything required from a stage presentation and props. The Chatham High School 2016-2017 play calendar has been set, so the fall play will be the 3-act You Can't Take It With You, the 1936 comedy, and the musical will be The Addams Family, which is the characters from the mid-60s sitcom, so those should both be great plays. So again, that's the fall and the musical, the winter musical. The Chatham High School Select Choir and the Chatham Voices will be performing at the Baccalaureate on Tuesday night, the 21st, tomorrow night, and also at graduation on Thursday night for the high school. And just a quick note, the Chatham Music Theater Boosters will be changing its name for the 16-17 school year and going forward. The organization's mission will remain the same, to support it supports K to 12, not just the high school. It runs the whole district, so it's K to 12 performing arts. And the new name will be the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters. So if you see that name, it's just the Chatham Music Theater Boosters rebranded. Moving on to Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny.
Nothing to report at this time.
Mr. Gilfillan, did Recreation meet?
Recreation has not met, however, I will act as the quasi-liaison between the Board of Education and the Senior Center. So as we've been doing in the last about 2 years, whenever we're doing anything significant from a Board of Ed perspective, we do go in and present to the Senior Center and allow for any questions that they can bring that information down to any of the constituents that utilize the Chatham Senior Center. The main focus was surrounding questions around the upcoming budget, and then secondly is the upcoming referendum. And the focus really is more about how do we get better in terms of communicating what we do as a district to people who don't have kids in the school system, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of seniors. The the figures I think that we've been working with for years is that around 55% of the homes in Chatham don't contribute kids to the school system. So we're trying to find ways, whereas we email blast out, as you guys saw last week, the issues on the referendum, and then things that come out from the high school or any of the different schools to the community. Those are not, I'm not going to say restricted, but they are, right now, from the way the system is run, is purely to people who have kids in the school. So we're trying to find a way to better communicate that out versus the existing communicative structure, which is, pamphlets at the senior center, pamphlets at the town hall, the borough hall, and every other way. So I've worked with Mike over the last couple of days in trying to figure out other ways. Mike is now working with the township and the district to see whether or not they have any kind of email blast list that would be apropos for our communications to reach everyone that's outside of the school community. I've asked Mike to look into things such as the ability for people to sign up for email communications through the Chatham School District website. So there could be some form of, drop-down page and saying if you want to be alerted to district events, district athletics, something like that, where people can go and sign up because, more communication the better. Where we suffer, of course, is the generational gap of who has email and who does not, and there's no direct statistics that says X amount of seniors don't have access to the internet, don't have email. So it's really trying to figure out ways now to get the communication out to that group of people as well. So this is not going to be a perfect situation for us. It's not going to be something that's going to be cured overnight. There is a lot of things for us to try to work for in order to get this communication out. But it's something that I think is relevant to us. I think it's relevant to all the taxpayers to have more regular access to information, and how we present that information is something that we should be focused on going forward. And it's also a big endeavor, since we really have to utilize all the different agencies, in essence, within the Chatham borough and township. So that is what their largest concern was, and we started working on that within an hour after the meeting. So.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for continuing that conversation on communication. We've been working on that for a while. The senior center does have computers where even folks without them can access them there if they choose.
Yeah.
It's not going to plug every gap,
Yeah.
but okay, that's fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Ms. Cronin, has the district cabinet? No meeting? Until September. Okay, fantastic. Then I'd like to move the minutes of our June 6th public session.
I'll second.
Second. Peter, was everybody? No, Kim and, I'm sorry, Ann and Rich.
I was here.
Okay. Could you do a roll call?
Sure. The minutes, Mr. Gilpin.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold. Yes. Ms. Chagrelli.
Abstain.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Collins. Abstain. Ms. Cronin.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Passed 702.
702. Thank you very much. 702. I just wanted to, a number of folks entered late, so I'm just going to say again what I said at the beginning of the meeting. The public commentary, we're going to have two sessions. One is going to start in a moment. And again, the public commentary is the public's opportunity to address the board, make any comments, any opinions. It's not a back and forth opportunity. It's not a QA. So please, use your time, make your comments. Then the board is going to move on with the regular agenda, and then there's a second opportunity at the end of the meeting to do additional public commentary. If board members wish to address or respond, I would ask again, we're just going to follow the same format. If you could hold your responses until the end of the second public commentary, that would be great. And if you wouldn't mind when you come up, if you wouldn't mind signing in, introducing yourself, where you live, and then just be sensitive to the time. There's probably about 10-ish or so folks that I think that want to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Carr. Don't be shy. We haven't seen you since October.
No, August. I've been chasing around since then. My name is Stuart Carr. I live in Chatham, 3 Crestwood Drive. Here to talk about Washington Avenue School, public or parking lot, but I had a couple of questions to begin with. First of all, Mr. Arnott, thank you for deciding to come onto the board. I had a quick question for you. You can maybe answer in the public forum afterwards, or the public comment, not the public commentary, but the business commentary after If you were on the committee in September, October 2015, would you have been for advocating for staying in April with the election? Would you have advocated moving to November for the election? Or would you have advocated for having a public question on a ballot for the public to decide? And if I don't hear otherwise, I'll assume you would have said move to November. So if you could, speak to that at some point, that would be appreciated. Number two issue, I guess procedurally, I guess it's a new idea here, where we have a public commentary, then a second public commentary, and then board discussion after the second public commentary. It would seem to me procedurally that if questions come up in the first public forum, that if there is dialogue and some board members wanted to comment on that, that would then give the public to comment on the comments, or give the opportunity to do that, instead of having to wait at least until the next meeting to come in. So it seems to me that's a little bit questionable, at least in my mind, and it's, again, perhaps not the best use of the public's time. So if we could perhaps reconsider that, and at least in some cases, if board members did want to speak after the first public, that they would get the opportunity to do so as opposed to wait until after the second public commentary. So then the other question I had was, this is something I guess I'd like to ask now, and perhaps you could, Ms. Weber, respond. Is the issue of Washington Avenue School finished, or is there still discussion going on, or could discussion be reopened before this is decided to actually move forward? Because I didn't hear that in the last meeting. We heard public commentary, but I haven't heard as to whether that's a done deal and you're just letting the people blow some steam off, or whether in fact this commentary will impact the ultimate decision here.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. We'll address it at the end.
So we don't know then whether the deal has already been done, whether the board has already voted to proceed?
Yes, we'll address it at the end. We'll address your comments at the end.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, I guess a couple comments I have on that. Number one, the issue of the population of the students going from, I guess, 286 to 440 over the last 2003, I guess, to 2016, when Ms. Quigley, I guess, was there initially. That's a 50% increase, as Ms. Weber indicated the other day. It's been pretty much, as my understanding, flat since 2009. It was like 450 in 2009. It's been bouncing around 450 to 420 since 2016, or since 2009. So it's somewhere for the last 7 years been pretty much flat. So while it did pop up, well, Mr. Becker's issue about 1972 or whatever, while it did pop up, it's been pretty flat for the last number of years, and somehow we've been able to survive with that. But the fundamental question that I have here, and it has not been addressed anywhere that I've seen, is has there been a forum where neighbors and the borough and the Board of Education had been in the same room at the same time and discussed the trade-offs of .16 acres becoming macadam versus utilizing existing infrastructure, existing streets for parking? I know we have a 3-hour ordinance issue. Was one of those questions asked to the borough, would you be willing to change the ordinance? We've heard all about the police. We've danced around all the issues. Well, the police don't want to give tickets. They've got to live within the ordinance, etc. The fundamental question is, has anybody here formally asked the council at the borough whether they could change the ordinance? I've not heard that, because if they could change the ordinance to 4 or 5 hours, presumably some of this issue could be addressed, and simultaneously we could also deal with commuter parking. If people are there for 7 or 8 hours, slap them with a $100 ticket, and that issue goes away very, very quickly. So the question again becomes, are we really vetting these issues before we go out with the macadam? I understand Dr. LaSousa's advocacy for 20 or 30 or 40 parking spaces. I understand Ms. Quigley's, advocacy for that. That's terrific. But I think as a board, again, not only do you deal with the school proper, you also represent the constituents, as we know, and you should be challenging, I think, perhaps a little bit more these representations that have been made here. Now, perhaps Mr. Gilfillan in the facilities group has done that over the last year, but at least as of August of 2015, when I last addressed this issue, we hadn't gone through that very much. We've heard anything from safety issues. We've heard things about the issue of moving people back and forth. We've heard a number of different excuses, but I just think that we haven't really vetted the issue of, can we do the trade-off of people tolerating people parking in front of their spaces versus giving away .16 acres. And again, maybe that question's been asked. I would appreciate you saying in the public commentary exactly who asked that question to whom. That's what Ms. Clark was speaking to the other day, but didn't quite get there. Was there a formal request made to the borough? Because the excuse is, well, people don't like parking, our hands are tied per Mr. Tequila in last August, saying basically the residents are making us do this because they're the ones that don't want any parking. Well, again, if the resident's been given the opportunity to say, I'll tolerate the parking for the .16 acre, has that question been asked? And the other issue that I think is a big issue, at least from my perspective as a non-local resident there, is the first that I understand a lot of these folks got information was when they had the planning board notification, which is way after the fact. I think as a courtesy, what the board should have done here is along around August of last year, when this started really getting going again in the committees, was to notify the people at the board level directly to them so that people could have come here 6 months earlier and had some input, as opposed to getting notified when the deal is already done and the planning board has no jurisdiction whatsoever. Then people go and get their noses out of joint at the borough for a good reason, but it's kind of a misdirected issue. The borough says it's not our problem, it's the school district's problem. It's a school district issue. So I think, again, it's a courtesy, speaking of, again, communicating with everyone. These people, the 150 feet or 200 feet, whatever, those people should have been on the mailing list 6 months ago from the board here, not just from a planning board for a courtesy review after the fact. So if you can consider those items, I think people have more specific issues, but I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork about where the frustration is with a lot of people, where they just get notified after everything is done, and you wonder why people aren't really into this. And again, it's just really, as I said, frustrating that we can't get this stuff done up front. We say we have public meetings, we do. People don't generally go to these meetings. You know that as well as anyone. We should really get direct communication, and it's only because the borough, my understanding, directed it in the shared services agreement that these people even got notified at all. So I think, again, the courtesy should have been there before the fact, and I would hope that you reconsider the timing of this in order to get the locals involved and make sure that we're doing the right thing. Because I, for one, think 20 parking spaces can be found around the area, and we can ameliorate that without safety concerns, without these other different issues. I just don't think we've actually vetted it with the group of people in the same room. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Carr.
I have a couple of handouts.
If you could just give those to Peter.
Sure.
Yeah, if you have any handouts, just hand them to Peter DeQuilla. And I apologize, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, I will.
Thanks so much.
There's two. I didn't have enough foresight.
The board can share.
Okay, very good. What these are, there's two different, oh, okay, he's handling it. My name is Andrea Scara. I'm a resident of Orchard Road on the low-numbered side of Orchard Road. And I'd like to talk again about the Washington Avenue School parking situation. There's two things that I'd like to describe. Sorry, I didn't sign it. There's two things I'd like to address. One is the extent to which the current parking is unused, and the second is to propose a couple of alternative solutions to the parking lot. The first handout, the one that looks like a graph, the one that looks like a graph is some counts of unoccupied spaces that we've been doing since the beginning of June. I guess June 2nd was the first time that we did some counts. We did the counts between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, around noontime, 12 to 12:30, 11:45 to 12:30, in that time frame. And then again in the afternoon between 2 and 2:30. As you can see, since the beginning of June, with the exception of one reading, and I can talk about that, we never found any fewer than 10 unoccupied spaces. That is, no matter what time of the day we went, there were always 10 unoccupied spaces. Washington Avenue was not teeming with parked cars, so I don't know where these extra people are that we need the 20-space parking lot for, but they're not using the spaces that we currently have. The one time when, oh, and just to show you the graph, along the x-axis, I've also indicated from the Washington Avenue School website any special activities that were going on a particular day. The only day where there was really a drop in the number of unoccupied spaces was on June 15th. It was a Wednesday. And from the look of it, there were a lot of parents there, and I did see some parents getting in and out of certain cars in the parking lot. So it's clear that the reason that there were only 7 unoccupied spaces at that observation point was that many of the spaces were being used by parents who were at this event. So we've only been doing it since June 2nd, and again, it's because of the fact we really didn't know about the parking lot going on. The second thing that I'd like to address is when we asked at the original presentation at the planning board whether alternative solutions had been considered, we didn't really get a very, strong answer. One of the things we'd like to suggest is on-street parking, and to differentiate the staff from perhaps trained commuters, we'd recommend that some of these staff parking, things be, this one is from Southern Boulevard School. Apparently there was a program at Southern Boulevard where they use these things to hang on your rearview mirror to indicate that you were staff at Southern Boulevard rather than a visitor. So when we say on-street parking, we're really not considering anything that applies to everybody like commuters. We're really talking about having something like an indicator that you'd hang on your rearview mirror to indicate that you are staff. However, based on the counts we did, we didn't see a need for even on-street parking. We also wondered if any different locations had been considered on the school property. Over the other thing that I handed out is an aerial view of the school. And you can see that I've kind of got it turned around. North actually faces left on this. And what you're looking at is the bottom of the picture is the input from the high numbered end of Orchard Road. So, they would drive in from the Orchard Road on that side, have the parking lot be right there in front of them, and then they would exit the same way. You'll notice that there is an existing drainage capability already there on that side of the school. Moreover, the parking lot would not have to be built up as is necessary in the currently proposed location. So this, other than the fact that the play area that's there that would have to be relocated, this would be an easier place to build a parking lot. And moreover, it has the advantage that it does not, this is important, this has an impact that it avoids further congestion on Washington Avenue. So that's probably one of the biggest problems of that school is congestion on Washington Avenue. This would take the traffic from that parking lot and do the entrance and exit on the other side of Orchard. So you wouldn't be adding more cars to Washington Avenue. Finally, if all else fails, we would at least like to offer perhaps to delay this until a needs analysis really has been done as to whether that's still really required, the 20 spaces. I know this requirement is left over from a few years ago, and it would be very nice to know that it's still needed. I don't think any of us want people to be frustrated and not be able to find a place to park and park illegally because you can't find a place to park if we really need it. But, the question is, do we really need it? And we think that no matter what happens, even if we delay, the borough will still be able to address the issues of the one resident who's right next to the entrance to Washington Avenue. I don't know if you're familiar with this. They have to move the driveway over to give him access from Washington Avenue. We think that can easily be decoupled. The two projects aren't irrevocably linked. To deal with the residents' problem and not, necessarily put a parking lot there. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. I'm not sure if my comments are relative or needed if the board's mind is made up about the parking lot issue, although I seem to recall at the last board meeting that a decision wasn't yet made, but was rather pending a vote. I wasn't planning to attend the Board of Ed meeting tonight. At the last meeting, I put to closure for this school year my efforts to increase wellness initiatives and efforts to combat student stressors, particularly, although not exclusively, as it relates to the weight of homework. By the way, homework is still being given these last few days of school, and some projects were given at the middle school recently, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I also, at the last meeting, extended appreciation to administration and its board for its dedication and diligence on many levels. And tonight, I would like to reiterate that appreciation. But I decided to come tonight to weigh in regarding the parking lot expansion proposal at Washington Avenue School, which would destroy green space. Admittedly, I'm new to the issue, and as I said before, I do not even live near the affected streets. But whenever any group decides to take from the natural environment in the name of convenience, progress, or perceived need, I do think it's worth pause. Land, as stated by Aldo Leopold, shouldn't be regarded as a commodity belonging to us, but rather as our community to which we all belong, and therefore it should be used with respect and not abused. I could understand that the board may be anxious to implement the parking lot project over the summer months, but unless the undertaking is so pressing and so very time-consuming, I would just urge that the matter be tabled for now until, at very least, the public can get a better understanding of all the research the board did before coming to its conclusion, versus just a needs study based on census presented tonight, although that was a start. I believe the board uses due diligence in matters, even if I don't always agree with the outcomes. But frankly, the public perception, even if it's a misperception, is that the board lacks transparency, makes decisions absent constituent input, and deals with after-the-fact communications to the community. So think of the overall budget referendum about the high school and Cougar Field and the STEM labs last year. Think about changing the date of the budget vote. Those were kind of hotbed issues. So to now vote on another project just when the school year is ending and people's radars are not cued into school-related matters, but instead summer vacation plans, may at minimum reflect poor timing on the board's part to bring a vote forward. I'd like to see a special information session on this topic in the autumn if possible, including an expanded explanation of why other options can't work. And of other options, is it possible St. Patrick's Church could lend us some parking spaces during weekdays when their masses are not held? Also, with some of the itinerant teachers, those visiting the sites to do school business, perhaps some kind of shuttle van service or carpooling be tried like they do on corporate campuses. After all, once we get rid of green space, we do not get it back. I like quotes and expressions, and I read, "The frog does not drink up in entirety the pond in which it lives." We shouldn't use up, little by little, all the greenery around us. How do we justify to our kids Earth Days in school, farm and school-to-table partnerships, gardens, composting at lunch, and then we bulldoze the school's green areas? To quote Ansel Adams in closing, "It's horrifying that we have to fight our own government, however local, to save the environment." Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin.
Good evening. My name is Robert Steelman, Chatham Street in the borough. My comments for the board tonight are on the proposed parking lot at the Washington School. I asked the board to reevaluate, perhaps reconsider, the idea that there is a parking shortage and it needs to be resolved in the manner of 20 additional parking spaces. You know, there is no state of Department of Ed guidelines or minimums for parking or educational efficiency standards tied to parking. However, there are some construction industry and zoning guidelines for elementary schools in New Jersey and across the country. There's a formula, and it is a full-time enrolled divided by teaching stations or classes with an average size and a multiplier number used to determine parking if a school was being planned or facility being evaluated. The multiplier starts at 1.5, and due to special service staffing, the accepted multiplier is 2.25 or 3. For example, Washington Avenue School with a full-time enrolled of 430, you divide that by 20 times 3, that equals 65. You have 72 parking spaces, not counting the handicap spaces there. And sort of an anomaly, you have two numbered 27 spaces, one on the lot for Washington and one on Watchung. Interesting. But if you use a 2.25, then that number drops to 48. It's a 17 spaces difference. And to look at Southern Boulevard, for example, you have a full-time enrolled of 465. If you use 20 times 3, you have 68 spaces. You have 71 spaces there. Using 2.25, of course, would be 52. Milton have a full-time enrolled of 337. Divide that by 20 times 3. You would need 55 parking spaces. You have 41. Using the 2.25, 38 would be the number. Now, add to these guidelines, the State Department of Education requires a demographic study for reasons of facilities planning. Chatham's last study shows a 20% anticipated decline in elementary full-time enrollment in the 2019-2020 school year. This concept can be verified by the rate of empty nesters and the turnover in the community of those homes and anticipated construction of new housing units. And for the moment, let's put aside the issue of non-resident students that are added to the Chatham's full-time enrollment, and also the fluid nature of the special service staffing that does change over time and at facilities. The Board of Ed staff has represented on different views on parking in the last month. First, at the Planning Board meeting, when questions were asked about the need, there were no facts given, but a statement. The statement was that parking is needed and we need 20 spaces. At the Board of Ed meeting on the 6th, it was stated that 10 more spaces are needed than the current count would be 82. And then the superintendent was quoted on June 14th and essentially reaffirmed here, little different figures, but reaffirmed the quoted by saying parking need is based on full-time, 40 full-time, 40 part-time, a dozen or so staff, and then visitors. You know, of course, that analysis justifies the additional 20 parking spaces added to the 72. So if Washington needs 92 spaces on that formula, an addition of 20, then Southern Boulevard needs 100 spaces, an addition of 30. Milton needs 80 spaces, addition of 40. So, you know, I asked the board to consider the uncertainty shown in these conflicting statements. Now, I'll also ask you that you consider the superintendent's formula. It suggests a parking guideline of one adult with a vehicle per 4.6 students. That standard or guideline is not in practice anywhere, and that can be verified. It's wasteful, and in the case of both Milton and Washington, there are many off-site options available within accepted pedestrian distance of less than 1,200 feet or a 5-minute walk. The decision to remove green space and spend limited resources on an untested claim of shortage would be a failing of this board's oversight responsibility. You may be unmoved by my numbers, but referendums and election cycles may be moved if confidence is lost in the board's ability to make reasoned, sound decisions. All households, and especially I think 60% or more that don't have children under the age of 18, what they care about are good decisions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janet Langborg. I live at 82 Washington Avenue. My property is adjacent to Washington Avenue School, so obviously I'm here to talk about the parking lot. I really would, perhaps you can address, and I do agree with Mr. Carr, that perhaps a little bit more back and forth might be more reasonable. Perhaps I would like for you to put a hold on the project, and the reason is I really would like for there to be a meeting of school officials who actually know the school, who actually know the street, who actually know the parking issues that are there. At every single meeting that I've gone to, admittedly, over the last month or so only, I've heard misinformation. I heard misinformation presented here this evening. The school actually has 3 handicap spots, not 2, 3. So I really would love for there to be a meeting with school officials who know the neighborhood, school board members, the neighbors, Mr. Denavi, and more importantly, people from the borough, because they are invested in this project. I do think some conversation back and forth really would help us to find some alternative solutions, whether it be on-street parking, which I absolutely would be in favor of. I also would question when the on-street parking was brought up 2 years ago and was brought to the borough's attention, was a report issued? Because if there was, I don't think I've ever heard or seen that report anywhere. And also, I would really like for there to be a needs assessment report done, but perhaps not done by the school, not done by the neighbors, done by an outside reputable source, someone that we can all trust to say, this is the issue, but now we don't have any more time. Soon, 2 more days will go by, school will be over, no one will know till September. We really can't have that needs assessment until next September. So I really would ask for you to respectfully table the project and, consider and perhaps address in your response back to us whether or not you would be open to meeting again with school officials who know the school, know the traffic patterns, the neighbors, the board, Mr. Denavi, and members of the Borough Council. I really would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional public commentary for the first session? No? Thank you very much. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the regular agenda, and then we'll have board business, and then second opportunity for public commentary. And then we do not have an executive session, correct? Dr. D'Souza, we do not have
Correct.
another executive session. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to move on to personnel. I'm going to ask Ms. Triccarelli, do you mind moving all but A26 in personnel? And then I'm going to ask Mr. Connors to move A26. Ms. Clark and I are exempt from participating or really even being present for that discussion. So if you would just give us a moment to leave the room, and then Mr. Connors will address A26.
Sure.
And we're exempt out because Ms. Clark is a teacher and my husband is a teacher in another district, in another school district. So we are unable to either really listen in or participate in any of that discussion.
Got it.
So if you wouldn't mind moving personnel?
Sure. I'm going to move action items A1 through 25 and A27. 23 through 27 are on the addendum, and also the addition to number 8 on the addendum.
Is there any additional questions or comments for Ms. Clark, Ms. Chigarelli, or Ms. Grant?
I'll mention something quickly. Just the first item is for a teacher who has been with the district for 44 years. So that's an extraordinary length of service, who's taught in just about every building in the district, including Lum Avenue School, and has taught a variety of subjects, French and German being the most prominent. Also taught multiple board members, previous board members who have served in this chambers, and a spate of teachers and others in the community. So she's been a longstanding fixture, most recently at Chatham Middle School, so just want to thank her for her service. And also, one of the resignations is from Stacy Winters. She's somebody who was hired the same year I was back in 2001, worked together at the high school for quite some time, and happy to say she's moving on to a supervisory position in another district, so I wish her well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Congratulations to both of them. Well deserved on both fronts. Does anybody else have any additional questions on the personnel items that Ms. Chicarelli has moved so far? No? Going once, twice? Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind doing a...
Sure, A1 to 25 and A27. Mr. Bigwood?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott? Yes. Ms. Chigarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Rucker?
Yes.
Those agenda items pass 9-0.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clark and I are just going to step out for a moment. Mr. Connors, you have the floor.
Hi. Gonna change everything. Over the last several months, the Board of Education, Teachers Education Association, which is the union for the teachers. Rich, is your mic up? No, it's not. Over the last several months, the Board of Education and the Teachers Education Association, which is the union for the Teachers Association, have been involved in contract negotiations to renew the collective bargaining agreement that expires on June 30th, 2016. I'm happy to announce that we have reached a settlement that will be voted upon this evening, in a few moments actually. The net cost of the agreement will be 2.05% in year 1, 1.91% in year 2, and 1.91% in year 3. It's a 3-year contract. We arrived at this settlement by improving the salary guidelines of the association members, the teachers, by 2.75%. However, that's been in exchange for significant alterations and modifications to the current health and benefit packages that will achieve significant savings each year of the agreement. At this point, I would like to commend actually all of the people involved in the negotiations. Those would be the representatives from the teachers union as well as representatives from the administration. This was a difficult task. In collective bargaining, it's a give and take process. If they want something, they have to give something. If we want something, we have to give something. And the tenor and tone throughout the negotiations were extremely civil and courteous. The teachers had issues they needed to fight for, and they fought very vigorously. The administration had the same issues, and they did likewise. But throughout the negotiations, there was one paramount issue that was never lost sight of, and that was, quite frankly, the well-being of the students and the children of Chatham. To that, the teachers union and the administration worked tirelessly and to achieve what I believe is a fair and reasonable settlement and a new contract for all. So at this particular point, I would then move action item A26.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments regarding the contract? Well, I feel like I'm in trouble. Any questions? No? Mr. DeQuilla,
Agenda
If you would,
item
please.
A26, Mr. Gilpin.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli.
Yes.
I am recording both Ms. Clark and Ms. Weber as abstentions. Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Curran.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
And Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Agenda item passes 7-0.
Thank you.
So while we're waiting, we can move action items B1 through 18.
Second.
A number of thank yous, some pretty massive donations, once again, with the outstanding support of the school district by the parents. One in the amount of $2,500 from the AXA Foundation to be used for professional development activities at the high school. Chatham Education Foundation donations in the amount of $41,550 for a number of different initiatives, more importantly, in terms of the classroom of the future, which I assume is on the IT side. I would guess that's going to have to bring the CEF donations close to $1.1 million lifetime, which is outstanding. Chatham Music and Theater Boosters, which will forever be the last time we will accept it under that that name, in the amount of $21,164 for multiple projects across the theaters within the district. An athletic booster donation at Chatham High School for about $5,000 for a number of different projects within the athletic department. PTO of the Chatham's donation, $23,825 for a number of different items which are based around the flexible and learner-friendly classroom furniture. A Lafayette Avenue school PTO donation in the amount of $4,800 to support the school's One School, One Book program for next year. And then last but not least, a Washington Avenue PTO donation of about $4,700 to replace furniture at the school's STEM lab. So that's a number of donations factoring up to, oh God, almost $100,000, whatever the figure is, from people in town. So fantastic stuff.
Matt, just to echo that, the PTO donation for $23,825 and the CEF donation for $30,000 are all aimed at the same thing, and it's actually not tech. It's about getting furniture, continuing to get furniture into classrooms to support student wellness that allows for greater movement of students, collaboration, standing while learning, not just sitting, having some way to channel energy either by, tapping your foot on a band, or even an exercise cycle underneath the desk just to keep kids engaged and not sitting sedentary all day long at desks. So special thanks to CEF and PTO for supporting us.
Well done.
And for CEF, for the Oregon Gillingham stuff, I think it's great, kind of a different angle, empowering the teachers to recognize something like that. So I think that will benefit Washington Avenue, and I hope they consider doing that in other schools as well.
Any additional comments or questions on finance or facilities? No, great stuff. Thank you, Matt. Mr. DeQuilla?
Sure. Agenda items B1 through B18. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin? Oh, sorry. Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
And Ms. Welch?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Kenny?
Yes. I'd like to move action items C1 to C3 for vote.
I'll second. I just have a quick question. When you look at the tuition rates for those incoming students, when you look at the students at Southern and Washington, at those elementary clusters, is that provided by space, where space is available? And if space is not available or clusters, bubbles get big, how do we address that?
That's how we assign the students based on where the space is.
But once they're assigned, do they typically stay in that
They do.
environment? They do. Okay, so if there's a class that looks like it's getting big and we're getting close,
Well, that very rarely happens after
Okay.
first grade. Usually kindergarten or first grade is where it is, and that's when most kids enter.
okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions on curriculum items? No? Mr. DeQuilla?
Sure. Agenda items C1 to C3. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin? Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
And Ms. Welch?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Thank you. Moving on to policy, Mr. Franz?
I Move to move agenda item D, spot 1. Second.
Does anybody have any questions? This is a first reading of these policies. No questions? Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Sure, agenda item D1, Mr. Bluefield.
Yes.
Mr. Arnick.
Yes.
Ms. Chigarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Donners.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Very good, thank you very much. We are now moving into the board business portion of the program. If any old or new business that folks would like to bring up, I just want to, I know you said it earlier, the calendars, Dr. LaSousa, those will be, are we voting on those at the next meeting or sometime over the summer?
I was hoping for the next meeting, but it wouldn't have to be. We could push
Okay.
them off till August if we
Okay,
want.
I know folks are anxious to get the calendars. Teachers plan vacations and have to coordinate with their own family schedules. Does anybody on the board have any objections to voting on calendars in July? No? The sooner the better is easier for residents to plan and teachers to plan.
No, I agree. I do agree though with Mrs. Clark that we should send out another reminder to parents because there's so much going on this week that I can guarantee that people have forgotten to send in their voice about it.
Right. Does
I know
anyone?
I did.
Okay, perfect. I think that's a good idea. Have you gotten a high response from the staff?
I haven't even looked yet.
Okay, no problem. You'll let us know on July 18th. I just one other question, sorry, board members, if you want to jump in. One other question, just since this is our last meeting of the school year, is there anything that you would like to highlight on the school year? I mean, generally, the discipline report was, really as good as it can get. I mean, certainly the items of race and HIB we're going to continue to focus on. The fact that the numbers are going down is fantastic. In the high school of 1,200 kids, she has to suspend open campus for 4 or 5 a year. I mean, these are not horrible problems to have, given the relative scheme and what we read in the paper. So I was just curious if there's any recap that you wanted to, provide or anything you wanted to highlight at the end of the year.
I did highlight at the last meeting just some of the wellness initiatives that we've taken. I think we're obviously a high-achieving district, and I feel like we've moved into some territory recently in the last couple of years where we're trying to look more broadly at what students are experiencing in our schools and how we can help them adjust better socially, emotionally, not just academically. And I think we've made some real positive strides. I mentioned just at the end of the discipline report, and I'm going to invite Cheryl Russo here one night next year. But they initiated something related to mindfulness and slowing kids down and focusing at the beginning of the day and after lunch every day. It's just a simple, quiet time for 4 or 5 minutes where kids can breathe, they can just think, but they wind the kids down. And we've had a pretty dramatic reduction in disciplinary incidents at that school. And that's just one component of many that are taking shape throughout the district to help address the needs of students, not just in an academic way. And of course, we've always been doing that, but I think that this year we've made some really terrific strides all over the schools. And if I were to think about what I'm most happy about over the course of this year, it's probably that.
Yeah, the presentations has been fantastic. Particularly, I enjoyed the texting, distracted driving. That one really seemed to hit home with certainly the upper classes at the high school. And I think Ms. Clark pointed out that often it's not the students texting, it's sometimes the parents, and the students need to get on the parents. One other question on the wellness front. You had indicated that you were looking into or doing some research on the possibility of maybe starting the high school a little bit later in the day. And I know there's a ton of logistics and issues. Are you going to spend some time, continuing to research that? We've heard so much about how sleep is so important, particularly, at that age, even more than some of the K-3 students who wake up early anyway.
That's one of our agenda items to look at more closely next year. There's a bill right now in the legislature that would establish a commission to look at school start times for middle school and high school kids because the research is so overwhelming about it. It does take a lot of logistics and shifting around of schedules, and if you're going to move the older kids later in the day, typically it means you shift the younger kids to earlier in the day, and that can have an impact on childcare arrangements and all kinds of other stuff. So it's on our list. It's on the Wellness Committee list.
And is it something Chatham can do in isolation without the state getting on board or other, you know?
Yes, we can, and other districts in neighboring states have done it. Randolph actually moved their time a little bit later than we did. What can't change typically is the start of physical extracurricular interscholastic sports contests. So if you shift later, you have to devise a way to release your high school athletes earlier than the rest of the student population, at least when they'd have to travel to away games.
Okay. Which is not atypical from what we do now.
No, and we're so reliant on technology that it's easier for kids to keep up and know what their assignments are if they are out of class for a day.
Right. Yeah, if they miss a day, and with the rotation, it wouldn't be the same class every day. If, you know, if games
Right.
are always on a Tuesday or a Thursday, it wouldn't be the same class each time. Okay, no, I'd like to see some additional research, and I know that's not something that's going to be solved in a day, a week, a month, but I'd like to continue to explore that just because the research is so alarming and so staggering on how damaging
Agreed.
it is to not have enough sleep for that, particularly that age group. Any other additional business board would like to bring up? Any recaps, any, good? No? Very good.
If I may, I just have one item which I omitted. Obviously, we have two, for the Board of Ed at the November election. There are two township seats open and one borough seat open. The candidate packets are available at the board office, and they need to be submitted to the County Office of Elections by July 25th at 4 p.m.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent. You and Sal. And Mr. Franz in the borough.
Good luck.
Thank you, Peter. That's a great reminder. We have our second opportunity for public commentary.
Do a repeat?
I'm sorry. No, say, repeat.
Great, thank you. My name is Stuart Carr, 3 Crestwood Drive, Chatham, once again. Mr. Arnott, again, the reason for my inquiry there was the Chatham 2020 preparation, what we need to do in that regard. So where you stand would be very helpful on that item. Back to Washington Avenue School for a moment, or the parking lot. The issue of the safety issue that I believe Ms. Clark or Ms. Weber referenced the other day. Again, if this truly is a safety issue, then presumably this should have been done 5 or 6 years ago. For lousy $100,000 or whatever it is, if there really are concerns about people popping in and out of cars and really, you know, students are at risk, then it shouldn't have been 2016. If we've been flatlining the population of the kids for the last 5 or 6 years, this discussion should have been had 5 or 6 years ago, and it should have been something that's just done without a whole lot of debate, which leads me to think that it's probably not completely a safety issue. Connected with that, the issue of the ordinance, it just seems to me that if you have a 4 or 5 hour parking limitation as opposed to 3 hour parking limitation, there's not going to be more darting of kids in and out of spaces. Right now, we have the ability apparently to park on these different streets, so we've already got that risk as it is. Extending the parking time to enable these part-time teachers to get in there and be able to get in without getting tickets should be able to be done. Dr. LaSousa referenced again about the interpretation of the ordinances by the police. Again, I'm not talking about interpreting the ordinance. We're talking about a formal request to change the ordinance to a longer period of time in order that we can get the part-time teachers in there and still short enough time not to have a commuter issue. And the issue again with the Mr. Tequila back on August 31st saying one of the big reasons for the issue was the residents kind of brought it on us because the residents kicked and screamed and said we don't want to have parking in front of our house. Therefore, the borough changed the ordinance and made it restrictive, and therefore we at the Board of Education have our hands tied. Again, it goes back to the fundamental question. Let's get residents, let's get the Board of Education to formally ask the Borough Council to say, can we change the ordinance? And that's a question I haven't heard being asked. We talk to officials, we talk to Denave, we talk to all these different people, but we don't talk to the decision makers. There should be a principal-to-principal discussion. The board to the council formally requesting a change. If the board says no, or if the council says no, that's fine, but presumably the council would answer to the residents who would say, I'm willing to accept more parking on my street for longer periods of time. So if we can just keep that in mind. And my final comment is Ms. Clark had asked for these reports last week or 2 weeks ago that spoke to these studies that were being done. I just want to make sure that that question gets addressed here and that Ms. Clark's question is answered by Mr. DeKilla or whomever with these reports, because I haven't seen any in the public domain. And I would like to see if they do exist, and I think a lot of others would like to see that also. That's it for this evening. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any other, we're going to close the public commentary session if no other, going once, twice, very good. Okay, so we're going to close the public commentary session and then give the board members an opportunity if they have something they'd like to comment on or respond or something new that popped into their minds, that would be fine as well. So we're no longer accepting any additional public commentary, and we do not have an executive session, so we'll close the meeting after the board members have responded or commented if they choose. If they choose not to, that's also their prerogative. I'll start just to cover some of the topics that may or may not alleviate some additional comments. So my notes are a little bit all over the map as different people said stuff, but the one item, the public commentary session, we revamped the meeting slightly. It was just more efficient. We've been trying to get through heavy agendas. There was an awful lot of bantering back and forth and very agitated conversation, and it really didn't bode well. And Board of Educations have to have 6 meetings a year. We have 16, so we like to be as present as possible. Some Board of Educations, you really only have to have 1 public commentary. We like to have 2, so in case something was old or an agenda item, we like to have 2 sessions. But we found it more efficient to do it this way, and certainly future boards, whoever they may be, can readjust their meetings as they see fit. But this board, we're going to stick with this format for a little bit and see how that works. The other item, trying to address Mr. Carr's item. Yeah, I'm not going to address Mr. Arnott was not on the board, so, I mean, that's certainly up to him, but he was not on the board, he wasn't privy, he wasn't part of that Board of Education, so personally, I don't think it's fair that he answered that question, but that's certainly up to Mr. Arnott. We have worked with the borough. I think the question, the burning question, or the common theme is, have you worked with the borough? And I've sat through, over the last 3 years, several meetings with borough and residents and attorneys, the decision makers, as Mr. Carr points out. Mr. Gilfillan has sat in on meetings as well. Some we've been in together, some dividing and conquer. Mr. DeQuilla certainly has, Dr. LaSousa, over the course of 3 years. We have worked with the borough. We have asked, can we get permits? Can we put tags? Can we extend it? Is there any way that we could, do additional parking on the street? And it's simply been a safety issue for the borough. It's a narrow space. There's 2 schools converging. Again, it's just a safety issue, and they really do not want to extend the parking hours, and they don't want to issue permits. We do have a few staff members that were able to get permits under special circumstances. If you're a full-time caregiver, so we are able to get a few. We have had staff members ticketed who have parked there long enough or over the ordinance time, and they have been ticketed. I believe, again, this has been 3 years. We've delayed this for 3 years, doing analysis, doing research. We have spoken to the people that are in the know, the principal, the security officer, the borough council. We've been working on this for 3 years. This is nothing that was dropped on. This has been talked about at numerous planning board meetings. And Mr. Gilfillan will have to correct me, but we've talked about it certainly at every budget cycle, because it's on every budget presentation, so we talk about it through the entire winter at every board meeting, because it's been on the plans, and it has become more of a safety issue in recent years. Having the security officer outside in the street moving cars and juggling cars at different times of the day is a safety issue. Unfortunately, crimes of opportunity happen, and to have her physically out of the building down the street, it can present a problem. We've been lucky. Other schools and other places, there's just too many school shootings and shootings just at random places that we can't anticipate, but it's certainly not optimal to have our security officers playing the role of valet and keeping track of keys and running cars out to the street. I think I covered everything. Moving it from one side of Washington to a different side of Orchard, moving it on top of a playground. We have looked at every permutation. We've looked at every possibility. This is the least. Nobody wants to spend $100,000 to pave a parking lot. I think that's fair to say. We'd rather spend $100,000 on other items, but this is no longer a want. This is a need, in my opinion, and I think we need to move forward with this project. I don't know if anybody else has anything unique or if they'd want to say. It's certainly your call. Lucky me, sitting in the fluffy chair, I get to go first. Does anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? If anything unique or new? No? Sal, you're good? Rich, good? Matt, good? Mr. Franz? Good. We're good. Mrs. Clark? Lada, Ms. Kenny, Ann? Everybody good? Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming out. We'll be back again in July 18th is our next meeting. Fantastic. Well, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you, everybody. Have a great summer.